Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to interview and introduce to you Kat Moreno, founder of Kolab Solutions. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. It is my insane pleasure to bring to you this amazing woman, Kat Moreno. She is the founder of Kolab Solutions. Miss Kat, thank you so much for joining me. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all the things. I appreciate you being willing to come on the podcast and share your experiences today.
I'm so excited to be here, Kale. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So I think let's jump right into it. One of the things that, Kolab Solutions, I understand this is something that you started on your own after kind of leaving the more traditional workforce and became your own entrepreneur. Can you talk us, one, what is Kolab Solutions? Two, what made you want to start it? And then how's that going for you?
So thanks for asking that question. So that was scary as hell, kind of jumping into doing it on my own. So I worked.
Nobody can relate to that. You're the only one. Yeah.
It was so scary, but I was working for one of my mentors for about almost like a year and a half, 18 months. And, he kept drilling in every single thing that he was saying in, how to scale a business, how to own a business, how to have the right people, how to hire, how to increase your cash flow, how to market. And after about 18 months of all of this going into my head and me helping kind of mentor through his products and services, thousands of people each and every week around the entire world in every industry that you can imagine, I was like, maybe I have these tools to kind of do it on my own. So I decided, I was like, you know what, let's try it. I'm going to bet on myself. And I decided to kind of step away from that role, which was kind of my dream job, and start off my own company. And initially, I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I don't even know. What can I offer? I'm really great at sales, really great communicating with people, really great at boiling down super complicated things and making it really easily digestible for people. So I ended up starting the consulting firm, Kolab Solutions, and it was very small initially, and we expanded to now we have about 5 people on the team. And what we do is primarily we're focused on kind of helping people break the barriers, right? The thought processes, the very old sales process that they have, their communication tactics, their marketing tactics, and connecting them with people that can help, right? So my company does in-house marketing. We do all sorts of SEO, email campaigns, ads. But also on the flip side, once we provide them with that and we say, hey, we're going to build you an organization structure to get inflow, how do you convert those people? So that's where our specialty lies. So Kolab Solutions, we do anything and everything that you need to optimize your business and kind of make you more money.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. And you're right, going back to, stepping out on your own, you're like you said, for the 18 months, you're just getting poured into and you're seeing this at work and at play, and like it does work. And to be able to step out, even having the knowledge, even having seen it in real life play out as a success, making that your own and stepping out, because we did a very similar journey with my wife and I had a very secure job, paid very well, and then like, man, I think I need to go do this leadership thing and start this podcast and all those things, and man, absolutely terrifying at times. So congratulations to you.
Of course, but it's so valuable. Like when I don't know if it happened to you, Kale, but like you're freaking out and you're like, oh my God, how can I do this? And then you end up closing deals and you're like, hey, I got some momentum going on. Like I can do this, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I won't end up down at the soup kitchen here this next weekend so far. Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, that success and get that steam train going. That's pretty legit. Now you talked a little bit about your past mentor, and of course, this is a leadership tilting podcast. I think that's what most of our listeners join for. What were some of the big lessons that you learned from that organization and how it was run from a leadership perspective, and maybe managerial would be more appropriate, but and then how do you in turn use that as you yourself being the leader and the business owner of your company that you're building your team?
Kale, this is like the $1 million thing that I hope that your listeners kind of get from this. I promise you it works. I've worked in so many different industries around the world, from like gaming to tourism to luxury brands and sales. But when I started working for this organization, and they're massive, they're huge, still one of my mentors today from a distance, but somebody that I highly respect. But being inside the organization, the number one thing that I learned, and I know it's going to sound so simple and basic, is communication, right? Because people think, I know how to communicate with someone, whether it's a teammate, whether it's your manager, whether it's bottom down and you're talking to one of your, your team members, subordinates, whatever the case may be. Clear communication. There must be 3 essential elements in order to communicate effectively, right? The first thing that I learned is your messaging must be almost idiot proof, right? So you need to clearly communicate what's happening, number 1. First and foremost, clear-cut communication. Number 2 is involve every single person that has to do with that project and more people, right? Because you need to have that open channel of communication. We will call it the communication line, the comm line. So everybody knew what was happening. Because what tends to happen in other organizations is you operate in silos. You think, I only need to talk to the purchasing manager and the marketing manager to execute whatever we need to do. But that's not right, because there might be someone down the line that's seen something that can optimize what you're doing. And when you empower your team to say, hey, I need you guys, you have your, your finger on the pulse of what's happening. You are in the trenches. Show me how we can get better. That was the second thing. And then the third thing is clear-cut communication, and then asking for an interpretation of what you've just said, right? Yeah. So you can say something, but if somebody has no idea what you've just said to them and they're like, yeah, no problem, you've already broken the chain of communication. It's gone, right? Yeah. And you have delays, you have miscommunications, you have people who are angry for no reason. So those 3 things were essential. And when I first started, Kale, I thought this person who was like the COO was a little condescending. I'm like, why is she talking to us like we're kindergartners, right? Right. Yeah. But after a while, I started to see it was a very exuberant way of communication. It was always smiling. It was always maintaining eye contact, but also repeating what she just said 4 times and you repeating back what she just said. Kale, it changed my life. I mean, interpersonal relationships, business communication, every single thing. That's been like the number 1 thing I've learned, and it's taken everything to another level.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to touch on with that, but one, the main thing is, because I think a lot of us, right, we all think we're awesome communicators, even though we mumble and we look down and then we don't say our complete thoughts, right? We all suck at communication. But the one thing that you bring out is, I think people have a fear of, in trying to communicate clearly and in trying to ensure that their audience is receiving, they have this fear of looking like they're condescending or looking like they don't trust the other person, when they're really like confirming, like, hey, are we on the same page? This is key to our success. And we need to ensure, especially you in that leadership position, you need to ensure that people are on the same page with your idea and your direction and the way your company is going.
100%. And it also empowers people as well, because you're passing the ball to them and saying, hey, I trust you. You understand what's going on. You've just interpreted what I've just said. I'm going to hand this off to you. Let me know when it's complete, or also bring in your team to help and assist. And it's a game changer.
And it opens up that by ensuring the interpretation is correct, it opens that opportunity for them to provide feedback. Or like, hey, have you, this is what I'm understanding that you want, boss. Have you thought about this other thing, that I see every day? Maybe you're making a big logistics change in your warehouse or something, but you're not the one slinging boxes, right? They're like, hey, you should really consider this. And the other thing I wanted to touch on that jumped into my brain, when you talk about bringing in, basically all your other departments, where is the cutoff between the advantage of gaining that additional perspective and input versus the potential disadvantage of having too many fingers in the pot and trying to make a decision?
Such a great question, because this was also my thing as well. Because, for example, we had a major event that was held once a year, a huge conference, and there was 120 people on that chain. And, there were departments like the logistics department that sells products. They did not need to be involved in that chain. However, just the clear communication allows the visibility. So there were people who were empowered. So I feel like it creates an empowering scenario, right? Because you have a message that you're like, hey, we have a delay in, issuing tickets and badges, right? But then someone from another department can say, hey, no, I spoke to this person, right? Of course, going through the chain of command first. It's not like you're putting all your business out on the group text that, the COO is included, but it sparks a conversation internally within your own team. You can say, hey, I have an idea real quick. I saw this person has the badges in the back of the warehouse. Can we go hit them up? Because that empowers a team member who's down here, who's seen something to say, I can help, right? It gives an intrinsic pull to an employee to help. Now, can it also muddy up the lines of communication? Absolutely. But I felt that in the beginning, the objectives were lined on the table. It was, hey, we're opening this channel of communication. If it pertains to you specifically, respond in the thread. If it doesn't pertain to you specifically, communicate with your manager, but also we want visibility across the board. So, there wasn't too many people that weren't involved in decision-making, kind of putting their business out there and saying, hey, my fingers in this pot, my fingers in this pot, and it turned it into a muddy situation. It was like top line instructions, clear definitions of the purpose, and then empowering people to solve and create solutions. So in that example, it worked. It truly worked. Now, is that going to work for anybody and everybody? I don't know. I don't know. But
it really goes back to that expectation and that standards that are laid out and part of your company culture, right? There's a difference between giving people full veto power over every decision you have. This isn't Congress here, versus like, hey, I desire your input as long as it's beneficial and in keeping with the intent of this project. However, like I'm still the decision maker. Like I'm still the one that's steering this, rowing this boat. Yeah.
I also feel like as well, that it does boil down from culture as well. Because if you're going to start something new, if you've never done this before, you've never opened up channels of communication, you've never involved all of your departments, you guys are used to operating in silos. This first requires the culture and the leaders to establish the baseline of what's expected. So I think there's kind of some steps involved in it, but it works, having everyone being visible and understanding where you kind of fall into place and having those channels of communications open, it's incredible. I mean, we had an emergency situation that happened at one of the events. And if we didn't have that communication line and we didn't have eyes everywhere, it could have turned into something, crazy. Someone, again, in the logistical department that had nothing to do with the event was like, oh, I saw this person. And it was like such a quick way of handling it. Instead of, I'm sure you've noticed, Kale, when people send email blasts to the whole company and nobody answers because they're like, oh, somebody else is going to handle it, right? Yeah. It's about visibility, accountability, and expectations.
Yeah. And that permission to speak up, right? Like it's okay if you've got input. Yeah, I love that. And you're right. It goes way before that event and before that takes place is your culture. We can spend a whole nother 2 hours just on what it takes to get to that point.
Yeah.
I would want to ask, because you touched on it real lightly because I want to get into it a little bit more because I think it's so fascinating. In a nutshell, what made you want to start your own company? Like why, presumably you were getting paid well, you were learning, presumably you enjoyed where you work, like you said. Why go out and take that risk? Why step out the door? No parachute, the whole 9 yards. What about being that entrepreneur and starting your own company was the appeal? Like what led to that?
Such a great question. And I can pinpoint it to almost the exact day that it happened. Through my mentors, programs, and products, I was hosting different mentorship weekly calls every single week with hundreds and thousands of people all over the world. And I was kind of like the host to ask questions to people. And when I saw a person that joined the program, implemented all of the tactics, the sales, the strategies, and started selling, going from $0 to $35,000 in the first month of operations. That was one example. And then I saw another person doing the same thing. And then a person that, and again, I know this is going to sound terrible, but a person who was really rough around the edges, didn't come from the best background, didn't have, the education in comparison to what I had, right? Bachelor's degree, they were like high school dropouts. I'm like, if this person can go from, working at Target to going ahead and starting their own landscape business and bringing in, 5 figures monthly,
Yeah.
if they can do it, I can do it too. So it was very empowering to see physically, because I know it's really tough for people to be like, hey, they have an idea and they're like, I want to start something new. I have no idea how to do it. If they've never seen examples of people who've done it before, it becomes this big, scary thing, way out of reach. Someone like me can never do that. But I think, Kale, the biggest thing was they're just like me. They're human beings. They're really cool. They're great. And they learned a skill to empower them to take that first step. I want to be an example of what I'm communicating with people every day as well. So, seeing the example, understanding that I knew what it takes, I've seen the example of it, and then trusting myself and saying, you know what? I just got to remove all the barriers and then just try it, because I couldn't not go on without trying it myself. So all those things in combination, it was just like one day I'm like, that's it. I got to do it.
Yeah. And that's so fascinating because really the only differentiator between successful entrepreneurs and the unsuccessful, in whatever way that looks, is the application of the knowledge and skills that you've learned. That's it. Like once you get the knowledge, it's just putting it into action and just kind of keep going until you figure it out, right? And having, certainly mentors. Yeah.
The biggest thing that I
legit.
saw, Kale, seeing thousands of people every single week, literally from around the world, is people knew what to do. They believed in themselves, but they didn't take the action step to get it done. And that's where a lot of people live. And, through your podcast and through your outreach, I hope people can understand, like, you guys can do it too. Just believe and take the actions, and you will be surprised. Once that ball starts rolling, more doors will open. People will start gravitating towards you. It's just momentum.
Yeah, 100%. Because you're right. We do see, like, we all know we shouldn't have that second, third, fourth, fifth pizza, right? But applying that knowledge and stopping us from doing that, what we know is bad from us, is easier and even more difficult than putting something into your life that will benefit you, right? So it's interesting on that two sides of the coin. Now, as you've gone through this journey and you're doing the things and you're building your business and you're having these successes, any setbacks, any lessons learned that were maybe a little hard to swallow at the time that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yep. So
that was a quick yep.
yeah, because I think the biggest thing as well for some folks is they don't like to admit their faults and mistakes, but I feel on the flip side it's so empowering to share your experience and show people that, like, hey, all this social media, all these perfect pictures of what people are doing, like, that's not real. There's setbacks. You will lose employees. You will lose revenue. Like, it is a reality. You will also lose momentum sometimes, and that can be like a soul crusher. So what ended up happening to me is, being the owner and founder of the company, I started having people that I believed in I know they needed a shot. That's basically what these people needed. They needed a shot. And what I did wrong, the biggest mistake that I did, was I assumed that painting the picture and the vision of my company to someone else without tying the dot, without connecting the dots of their goals and how they fit into the picture, I assumed that they would have the same drive, pull, and work ethic that I did. So I gave the ball to them, trusting 100%, like, hey, I know this person's gonna get it done because of what's happening. Every project was happening, we were getting paid 30,000 checks from all these different clients. And I'm like, you see, guys, this is, if you put in the work, this is what happens. But I guess what started happening is that people were, they were kind of having their setbacks. They were like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to grow? They were taking on my leadership problems that they didn't need to, and it retracted from what they were doing and caused a short circuit overload. So the biggest mistake is thinking that someone else is going to have the vision and work as hard as you do without you checking in and without you outlining, like, is this what you're doing? Is it inching us closer to the goal line and checking in consistently instead of 3 weeks in being like, hey, did you outline that marketing plan in the budget? And they were like, oh, well, I didn't get a chance to do it. And I'm like, oh no, like, this is not good. So that's the biggest mistake that hit me, and it set me back about 3 months. And it was devastating. It was devastating. I felt like a failure. I felt like I let everybody down, and it was tough, Kale. Like, that rebound was tough. But after picking myself up and closing more deals, I was like, okay, lesson learned. And I moved forward with establishing baseline, doing goals with people immediately as soon as they get there, and pinpointing projects that will get them to their goal, and saying, hey, you working on ABC for me within 2 weeks, that $3,000 is going to go straight to you. And as you continue on these milestones, you will get this money in order to fulfill your goal, or go to this conference to develop your skill set. I'll pay for it if you can do this milestone. So it was like connecting everything for a bigger purpose. Some people didn't see 10 years into the future that I did. They only saw the short term, right? So I would have to say, Kale, that was the biggest lesson that I learned.
Yeah. And it's easy, Kat, to see that as, not necessarily a black mark, but like a setback and a failure. But on one hand, it is a true testament of your character and your trust and belief in other people, right? And sometimes, that we can be too trusting because we want what's so awesome for these other people that we're given this opportunity for, because you do see the vision, but sometimes people just aren't there yet. And that's where, especially as business owners, you can kind of fall into that trap, as it sounds like what you did, of just being a little too trusting and expecting that same level of commitment as what you had. That's really interesting.
And that kind of rubs people the wrong way too. Like, I had a person who was a friend, a really close friend of mine. And when I was taking a more high level approach and kind of delegate, I was tapping into everybody's strengths and empowering them. On the flip side, this person looked at me and they were like, oh, well, we're doing this together, and why are you taking the reign? And it made them feel defensive. So again, that's another thing too, that's a reality for business owners, is like the personalities that you're bringing in. Like, you have to establish that baseline. Like, we want even-keeled people here. We want communication. We want a clear outline of what your role is, what I'm doing here, and how you fit into the mission. Like, there's no room for jealousy or crying or whatever. Like, that is real, but let's look at the bigger picture. And I had to learn that too. It's managing people and knowing how to pick up the pieces and keep running with it.
Yeah. And that's the trick, right? That's the ongoing lessons that we learn every day as different personalities and different situations that you as the business owner just hadn't experienced yet and hadn't gone through. So I commend you on pushing through, because a lot of people would see that and step back and be like, I can't do this. I'm not designed for this. I don't want to do this anymore, right? Because it's challenging. But you obviously have the nerve and the gumption to keep going. So that's pretty awesome that you are sticking with it. And I hope you continue to do so. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, another thing too, Kale, is that, like, instead of it letting deter me, I know it sounds funny, but like, I started looking at bigger examples in the world of people being overtaken in their own company. Like, I looked at the example of Steve Jobs, and I was like, if they kick Steve out, like, of course someone's going to turn against me, It's a reality, and you can't sit there in a corner crying. Like, I took 24 hours. I'm like, hey, here's the problem. Here's the situation. I feel down on myself, but like, let's go. Let's figure this out.
Yeah. Liz and I have had a couple of those moments too. We're like, oh man, that was so dumb. Why did we do that? Why did we make that decision? Why did we choose that thing? But yeah, you're right. You got to allow yourself to kind of like, okay, let's get over it. Let's have our little cry out or whatever that looks like for you. Go on that run or punch that punching bag, and then you reset because you're ultimately more committed to your goals and the goals of your business than you are to your own self-loathing or your self-pity, right? Like you forget that. We don't have time for that. Yeah, that's pretty legit. I
100%.
love that, Kat. Now I do. There's a couple last questions. One, I always ask my guests because I think it's so fascinating the range of interpretations. How do you see the difference in whether it's role, responsibility, or just overall mythos of a leader versus a manager in a business sense? Thoughts on that?
Mm. I think this is so appropriate to the example that I was just talking about as well, because, I've had amazing managers, incredible leaders. I've had terrible, horrible managers and terrible, horrible leaders. And I think the huge distinction between the two is a manager is kind of telling you what to do. It's kind of that illustration, the drawing of like, a person with 100 people pulling and like they're whipping them like, go, go, go. But then like a leader is someone who is in the mud, pulling pulling the ropes with you. And that's how I believe there's a true distinction between the two. A manager tells you what to do and delegates without perhaps knowing what it takes for that. Very closed off to opinions of other folks that are doing it day in, day out. I can't stand people that way. Like it's such a closed-minded perspective of that. And then on the flip side, I believe a true leader provides you with the opportunity to speak up, the confidence to have that intrinsic value, like I'm doing this for us and the purpose, not just to like pay my bills, right? It gives you a sense of like, I don't want to let this person down. I'm moving towards everything. And a leader also imposes a very, very strong culture, but not only says it and like gives you like a piece of paper to put on the wall in your cubicle, like, oh, we're great here. No, like
Teamwork, yeah.
yeah, teamwork. But no, they live it, they breathe it, they are there. They're walking around everywhere. They're sitting with, the lowest ranking employee to the top, and they're just like, show me what you're doing. How can I be of service to you? Tell me what you're experiencing and how can we optimize it? So I feel that there's a true difference between the two. And, I'm striving every day to be more like a leader instead of like, I feel like that manager thing is out. Like it's 2022, people are not looking to just follow orders anymore. They want a purpose. They want a reason. People want to be a part of something. So let them be a part of it and watch what they can do.
Yeah, that's exactly why, people want to be a part of Google. They want to be a part of, Facebook, any of these large corporations is because of that culture and that leadership that is in that corporation and that just aligns with their goals and everything. So that's cool.
Exactly.
And I love basically the push pull kind of analogy between the two. That's a really good. I'm taking notes like crazy here myself as you're dropping these amazing thoughts. I love it. So what I know people are like this Kat has got it going on. Like, how do people get into your world if they want to learn more about you, learn more about Kolab Solutions, or like, man, I just need your help? What's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Yeah, so my website, Kolab Solutions, KOLAB solutions.com. You can get a hold of me there. Even if it's, I help businesses, even like the smallest level, under 100,000 a year annual profits, all the way up to $1 million clients. I predominantly also work with female-based businesses because I feel like I have a huge pull for women, empowering them to kind of, fill those shoes and help them with that. So the website, you can get a hold of me. You can always email me anytime, Kat, K-A-T, at Kolab Solutions. Or the easiest way as well is my Instagram, KatXMO.
Perfect. And there will be links for those of you that didn't get a chance to write that down. There'll be links in the description of whichever platform you are listening or watching this on. Kat, thank you so much. Just kind of as a last, any upcoming projects or activities or events you've got coming up that you want to talk about real quick?
Yeah, so I started working with this organization called CEI. They're a huge international event planning company. So anybody on here, anybody who is planning an event, corporate, small, big, tiny, intimate, large scale, like I can connect you with these people. They turn your visions into a reality in the coolest way that you can ever imagine. So that's the next project I'm working towards. I mean, we're going to Korea in March, Abu Dhabi in April for these launch parties, and I'm trying to be worldwide, Kale. So that's what we're working on. That's what we got going on right now.
Well, I don't think you can get much more worldwide than Korea and Abu Dhabi. They're kind of encompass the whole thing. That's pretty legit. Man, that sounds exciting. Yeah, that's what a great opportunity. And man, absolutely. If you are looking for that, reach out to Kat and get in touch with her to get that connection. It's pretty legit. Miss Kat, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I mean, just from my personal perspective of getting to kind of learn and you know, whether it be your mistakes or your risks that you take and the teams that you're building is pretty incredible just from a fellow entrepreneur. Thank you so much for being willing to share your experiences with us.
It is my pleasure to be here, Kale. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, this has been the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. I appreciate you joining. Thank you again, Miss Kat Moreno, for joining me today. No matter where you're at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.